I'm Dana Moriello, and you're listening to This is a Thing, the podcast where I interview entrepreneurs who started unusual businesses about how they made their wild ideas happen. Today, we're talking to Rachel Clowes, founder of the Sustainable Sequin Company. Here's the wild idea. Launch a business selling custom sequins made from recycled plastic and bio-based materials out of a UK-based studio to fashion brands and makers around the world. I wanted to talk to Rachel because I am a big fan of her work. My favorite fashion category is vintage cruise wear, otherwise known as sequin-heavy dresses favored by the over 80 set for cruise ship dinners. And I'm amazed that I'm able to find these dresses in great shape in thrift shops because, as Rachel says, a traditional plastic sequin put on a dress that's only meant to be worn a handful of times lasts hundreds, if not thousands of years without degrading a bit. She saw a better way. What if the sequins only lasted a few years, that somebody actually wanted to get out of their dress, and then after that they morphed into something else entirely? The idea of taking something that's typically a tiny, cheap, mass-produced item, a sequin, and making it into something that's bespoke, artisan crafted, and sustainable was totally fascinating to me, and I wanted to know more. Stay tuned to hear about the thesis project that started it all with this incredible dissolving sequin dress. Hear how Rachel decided to turn a passion project into a business and the future that she sees for sustainable fashion embellishments. Enjoy the conversation. Let's start at the beginning, because I know that your academic history is really the genesis of where your business comes from. And when you were getting your MA at the London College of Fashion, your thesis project was the starting point. So I'd love to hear more about that project and how it came about.
I was working at London College of Fashion as an embroidery technician, and while I was there I asked if I could do my MA part-time, and happily they said yes. So when it came to my major project, I was looking initially at kind of the durability of clothing, and that led me to sort of special occasion clothing, so the clothes that you might wear to a wedding or an event or something like that, something you're excited about going to buy, that you want to look really good in, you're kind of quite glitzy. And I found there was this sort of disconnect between the length of time that the materials would last that made up those garments. So it might be like sequins, it might be synthetic materials, so things that can last thousands of years. And then when I surveyed women about how many times they would wear those kind of garments, I found it was like 2 to 3 times. And that was because we all get excited about getting something new and wearing it. But then once it is worn to an occasion, there's photos of you in that outfit, it's on social media, and people found that when it came to the next event, they didn't want to wear what they'd worn last time. So there wasn't enough opportunity for these clothes to be worn. And rather than them being passed on to somebody else so they could be worn, people were keeping them. It was that kind of idea of waste in the wardrobe, that you didn't want to get rid of something because it was expensive. When you bought it, you got happy memories of wearing it, you liked it, but then you hadn't got a reason to wear it again. So these clothes were not getting enough active life. So that was kind of how I came to the idea of looking at sequins. They're made of plastic, they're shiny, they're exciting, you want to wear them to a fun occasion, but they last far too long. They don't have appropriate durability.
So you did a beautiful thesis project that we'll put the links in the show notes so people can see the images of the dress with the sequins actually biodegrade. I thought that was incredible, how you gave more life to these garments. So I can see how after doing this, you can put that in the category of, hey, this was a cool thought experiment in art project. This is a hobby. It could go into many different categories, but you put it in the category of this is a business now. What made you decide it was something that was not just an intellectual interest, but there was a real business opportunity here?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because my major project was very much a speculative project. It was looking at making these bio-based sequins and using the inherent properties of starch, that it will dissolve in water, and saying that's a good thing. We're not going to try and make it something it's not. So I had this dress and it had 3 lives. So the first one had the sequins on, you could go wear it to your party, and then you dissolve the sequins, or part of the sequins, and it would become second dress, and then finally dissolved all the sequins. The sequins had natural dye in them, so those came out and they coloured the dress. So it looked different kind of from the beginning, and that was more a dress that you could wear for everyday use, so that you'd wear a lot more often. So it was very much a speculative project. I realised that commercially I couldn't sell sequins that were going to dissolve in the wash.
Did you pursue that? Did you think maybe I could sell sequins that dissolve, or you immediately knew that was not viable?
No, I think there is a difference between what people say they want and how they've used it and what they really do. So although we all know that sequins made of plastic, they last far too long, and we're not going to wear that dress again and again and again. We still don't like the idea of like dissolving something. It really makes people quite unsure because it feels like you're kind of downgrading what you have.
Oh, how interesting. And did you come to that realization through interviews and research? Was that intuition? How did you realize that?
I did surveys, but I also really thought about how I felt when I was dissolving the dress as well. It makes you feel quite nervous because you're not quite sure what's going to happen. And I spoke to a designer, and their brand was called Junkie Styling in London, and they worked slightly in a different way, but they worked when people brought in their clothes, and it was usually something that was special to them in some way, but they knew they weren't going to wear it, so they wanted it to be reworked. So I interviewed the designer from there, and she spoke about how people are quite nervous about chopping up and changing something that you really love. Mm-hmm. And she found people would do it, but the actual process was really nerve-wracking for people.
That's good data. That makes sense. You had an analog there in the market.
I decided that commercially it probably wasn't viable to sell sequins that dissolve, but I did think there was a place in the market for bio-based sequins, because really, when I was thinking about what I want to work with, I wanted to work with materials that aren't damaging to the environment and are appropriate for use. So I thought there was definitely space for bio-based materials. And it was also at a time when, particularly in the UK, we were thinking more about the problem of single-use plastics, so drinking straws, single-use plastic bags, things like that, that I think it just kind of come into the public consciousness that actually that's not a great idea. Plastic's an amazing material, but we really shouldn't be using it for things that we're going to use for like 10 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea of riding a macro trend, right? You saw the trend in the market. The trend wasn't yet applied to this category of goods where it could be. Now, as you think about the potential business opportunity there, when you decided to get this made, were you thinking about, I want to start a business when I'm done?
I hadn't really thought about setting up a business. My background is in embroidery, and I love textiles, I love fashion, I love embellishment. But in my home life, I was really concerned and thinking about sustainability and how I could live more sustainably. And I wanted those two things to come together. So I knew that I wanted to continue working within fashion and textiles. I knew that I didn't want to move into kind of being a sustainability consultant, like for a business or something else. I did the MA to try and combine those things together. And I didn't really think about where it was going to go. I hadn't thought about setting up a business at all.
So given that you hadn't thought about it when you started, do you remember the day when you said, wow, I could be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of two things. So after I finished my MA, there was a few years before I set up the business. I had a baby, we'd moved house and things. And just before I set up the business, we decided we were going to move out of London. So I knew that I wasn't going to be able to continue doing the job that I was currently doing. And I was also pregnant with my second child. So I was like, something's going to have to change with my work. So I thought working for myself would be a good thing at this time, because I'd be able to hopefully work around the kids, and setting up a business when you're pregnant is kind of the perfect time to do it, and also a ridiculous time to set up a business, to be very honest. So circumstance, I thought this is the best time to do this. And since doing my MA, I'd also been thinking about how I wanted to use the work that I'd done on my MA to do something else with, because I thought it was a viable business. So I'd been looking kind of at what I could do to be able to set that up.
So it sounds like it started from first priority is I want to start a business because I want more flexibility. I want something that works for my lifestyle now. What can I do? I have this base of knowledge, this project that I think has legs. That makes a lot of sense. What did you do to convince yourself that the environmentally friendly sequins, sustainable sequins, could be a business? What are the steps you took to build that confidence?
So I kind of looked at the fashion industry, and I knew that in general brands wanted to use more sustainable materials because their customers were asking for more sustainable materials. So I knew there was a gap in the market for this. I knew at the time as well people were thinking about how to be more sustainable. Things have changed slightly at the moment in the current climate, but at the time it was very much something that people were looking at. So I was researching about sequin suppliers. I managed to find that I could get recycled synthetic sequin film, and I thought, oh, well, maybe I could start doing that and see how it goes from that point. But I knew that I always wanted to move into being able to create a bio-based and biodegradable sequin film.
How did you get that first customer, that first validation that someone would pay you for this product you were creating?
Yeah, so I can't completely remember how it all happened, but I've been in touch with the Sustainable Angle, who run Future Fashion Expo, that are based in London. And through them, I was speaking to somebody who was setting up a business, a couple of people that set up a business, and I'd said kind of about sequins. And at this point, I must have known that I could get hold of synthetic recycled sequin film. And they said, okay, yeah, we'd like to order some from you. And at that point, I sort of thought, okay, I'll do this now. So I almost had the customer before I had the stock. So I said, yes, I can get that for you, sorted out the colours they needed. And then I got a government startup loan to buy some punching equipment, buy my first lot of sequin film, and kind of took it from there.
So it's a pretty unusual business that you started. Were there people around you who were doubting you? Did you have supporters? What was the conversation that was happening around you when you were deciding to start this?
No, I think everyone was supportive. They knew that I knew what I was talking about. And also it was fairly low risk to everybody else as well. Yeah. I'd got a government startup loan, which I could pay back over 5 years, which wasn't a huge amount. I think it's about £20,000 to pay back over 5 years. My partner was very keen that I made it a limited company so that if anything did go terribly wrong, that we weren't going to lose the house or anything like that. But like I said, financially, I hadn't got a lot to put into it and didn't put a lot of money in, and I knew that I'd be able to pay back the loan. I was pregnant with my second child, so I knew I'd be on maternity leave for a year anyway. So if I couldn't start to make it work within that time, then I'd be able to look for a different role. But when I set up as well, I just found people were really, really helpful. Like, so people within the sustainable fashion world were really helpful. I can remember going to a conference in London about biomaterials, and somebody had told, I think it's like a word of mouth thing somebody had told me about. I rang them, and I think it was like on the next day, and I was like, can I come? But also I've got this tiny baby. Can I bring this baby with me? And they said, yes, that's fine. And then I met a really lovely Professor Graham, who was from Bangor University in the Biocomposites Centre. And I spoke to him about what I wanted to do. And he was like, yeah, I think we can help with that. I mean, he even took the baby out for a bit and let me listen to some of the talk and everything. So it was great. So that was a really good introduction to be able to work with universities and start to understand how research works and how to get funding and how research projects work to kind of further what I wanted to do, because I didn't have any of the chemistry knowledge.
Yeah, man, talk about a supportive community. So supportive that you're bringing your baby to these conferences. People are rallying around you to help. That sounds absolutely beautiful. So I'm picturing what you're saying is it's really a right time situation, and you lowered the risk. All of that makes sense. I want to know more about what your goals were when you started, what you envisioned. Hey, if this is super successful, this is what my life is going to look like down the road. This is what I want this to become for me.
I don't think I really looked that far into the future. I really just wanted to do something which I felt would make a difference within kind of the sustainability and textiles field. When I started, what I really wanted to do was create a material that I could work with.
What I'm hearing is that you took things one step at a time, right? So you say, yeah. I want to try this. I want to do something that works for me. I want to see what happens. So then let's fast forward a year into the business, because you said you have your maternity leave. You're just going to see what happens. But if it doesn't work out, you can always get something else. But you didn't. You stayed with it after that. So was that another deliberate decision point for you then after that first year?
Yes. Yes. At that point, I was still working with the recycled plastic sequin film. I mean, and I have to say, I was very naive going into business as well, because I'm not from a business background. So I really thought, I'll start working with synthetic recycled plastics, and then I'll make money, and then I'll put that money into developing the bio-based sequins. But it wasn't quite as simple as that, because you need more money, basically, to be able to do the research and things. So after a year, I was kind of like, I still haven't got the bio-based sequins to market. So it's a really much longer process than I thought it would be. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just has taken longer, and that's given me longer to work kind of within the sequin industry, to understand how to work with the recycled sequin film, how to use the punching machines, how to kind of create more interesting designs and things. So yeah, I decided to stay working myself. I really enjoyed the flexibility, and I knew that that was going to be important for me kind of in the future. Once I started working for myself, I couldn't see how I was going to go back to working for somebody else. And there's good bits and bad bits, but I mean, for me, the flexibility is really, really important. And I found that I actually like all different aspects of the business, things that I didn't think I'd really like. I'm quite happy doing spreadsheets.
Like what?
So things like spreadsheets, just kind of understanding more about the data about things. Because like I say, I'm not from a business background at all. So it's taken a while to understand that what I'm doing is running a business, not just trying to develop a new product.
How did you realize that? Was there a moment when you realized that of, wow, I'm a business owner. This is, this is the real deal. This isn't just me making sequins. I am running a business with which sequins are the product.
I think it's more recently when I've kind of engaged with programs for business owners and spoken to different groups of people from completely different backgrounds and completely different businesses, but realised we're having the same kind of struggles. And people go into business for all sorts of different reasons. Some people really want to have a business and they don't particularly mind what that business is in. Whereas I've come from it, from what a lot of people do, I think, which is kind of from a passion project and then try to turn it into a business. So I think it's definitely more recently that I've kind of thought about, hang on, this is a proper business and I need to think about marketing. I need to think about all the things that businesses think about, not just about developing this new product. And I knew all the time I needed to have sales, but it was more about the systems of a business and how I can make the business grow, not necessarily more people, but just make it more successful and more sustainable.
And when you realize that, hey, there's all these other aspects of the business that really deserve more attention, how did you decide what to do about that? How did you decide to proceed?
I knew that at the moment that I need to just keep it to me rather than have somebody else in the business. But I think that's really hard as well because there's so much in the business and you can really easily get overwhelmed. And prioritising is obviously tricky sometimes because there's bits that are really exciting and you want to do. And then there's bits that really need to be done because otherwise you can't pay the bills.
Yep. So, and what is that thing for you? I'm always curious to hear an example of one of those things that you really don't want to do, but is absolutely necessary for your business.
I think sometimes it is sort of dealing with lots of emails, even though they're really important. I want to be getting on with the making and also more of the dry things, I guess, like looking at insurance. So things that are really important and really important to my customers, but it's really not a thing that I'm excited about, even though I know that it's important for the business.
So given that you're wearing so many hats and you're really doing everything, I'm correct, you don't have employees. This is you doing all of these roles right now?
Yes.
So how much of your time do you say now that you get to spend doing the thing that you love the most of focusing on the product?
Probably not that much. And a lot of the time I am kind of making and producing the sequins, but kind of the development side of it is hard. And what I intend to do is kind of block some of that time aside to make sure that the business can grow and I can make sure that the bio-based sequins kind of do make it commercially. But it does depend, different weeks and different months depend. So if I have a client that needs a lot, that I've got a lot of work on for, then obviously I need to focus on that. But there might be other weeks where it's a bit quieter and I can spend more time working kind of on the development side of things.
So you mentioned the development work that still needs to go into making those bio-based sequins commercializable. So I want to talk about that for a second because I think you made a really interesting and frankly admirable decision that your ultimate goal is bio-based. And many entrepreneurs would say, I'm not going to do anything until I can accomplish my ultimate goal. It's all or nothing. But you said, hey, there's a middle ground and I'm going to start with recycled before I can get there. How did you make that decision?
Looking back on that, I'm not sure if that was a good decision or not. I think there's pros and cons. I think that I would have kind of got further with the bio-based sequins had I just focused on that from the beginning, because you can put all your time and effort into that. But I thought naively, like I said, that I would be able to make some money from working on the synthetic recycled plastic sequins and then put that money into developing the bio-based sequins. And I think, like you said, there is a middle ground. So there's definite advantages to using a recycled plastic over a virgin plastic. So you're not using kind of fossil resources, you're making use of something that already exists. But saying that, there's still problems at end of life. And I tried to be quite open about the pros and the cons, basically, of the sequins that I'm selling at the moment. They're better than the most commercially available sequins. They don't have any PVC in them and they're recycled. But there's not a stream for them at end of life about how they're going to themselves be recycled. But because I think it's still a better product and that I could get it to market quickly, I thought there was still benefits to that, because hopefully if people are buying from me, they're not buying from somewhere else which has got more damaging sequins. And the good thing about that decision to start using the recycled plastic rather than go straight into bio-based was that I learned more about what I was doing. I could make more of the mistakes with working with clients, getting things set up. like I say, using the punching machine, seeing how things work, doing bespoke work, seeing what colours sell. So all of that kind of thing has given me more knowledge that as I go forward to develop the bio-based sequins, hopefully that can feed in so it can be more successful earlier on.
That sounds incredibly valuable. You mentioned that there are pros and cons. So I'm hearing a lot of pros. You said a con is that you maybe could have gone faster if you went right to bio-based. But am I correct? If you went right to bio-based, you probably would have needed to raise more money up front to be able to do so. It's a different type of business with its capital and timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is tricky to look at the funding landscape as well. And I've had some funding from Innovate UK to work with University of Leeds and Royal College of Art to develop some bio-based sequins. But it does rely on you applying for grants, being good at applying for grants, and then keep going in that cycle. I've got great partners to work with, which is the good thing. So when funding opportunities do come up, I have got people to work with. It's just getting the funding can be quite tricky.
So when you have recycled, you have something to sell and you can have revenue coming in much sooner.
Yeah, but it also means that I've got clients as well, and clients that I work with and support me and know that I'm trying to develop the bio-based. And hopefully when I have got that, I've already got all these people that will want to work with me. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So another decision that I wanted to talk about the strategy you took with the business is that's the product decision. So I want to talk about the customer decision. So if I understand it, you do largely bespoke, custom, and small batch runs. How did you decide that that was the way you're going to proceed relative to your ultimate, what I assume, tell me if I'm assuming incorrectly, sustainability goals to say we're going to replace all of the sequins maybe on the market? How did you think about where to start in that range?
Yeah, I'm tiny and I'm producing in the UK, so I can't compete with global sequin companies. My labour costs here are much more expensive than they would be in other parts of the world, which isn't a bad thing. It's just that's just how things are. So for me, it makes sense to work with kind of high-end but smallish companies that will pay a little bit more for sustainably produced materials. I really like being able to kind of do the bespoke work as well. I really enjoy that. I really like being able to work with somebody and they can tell me what shape of sequin they want, how they want it to work, and I can work on that for them. I don't just work with big companies. I work with students. I work with home sewers. So I sell in different quantities. So what I want to do is kind of be as open as I can to as many people as I can. So yeah, I can sell really small kind of quantities and do bespoke work that's like for very small amounts as well as kind of the larger brands. I do work with some large brands as well, but mostly it's that kind of middle, kind of small luxury.
It sounds like that decision is driven largely by, hey, I love to work directly with the clients. I like to have my hands on the product, and this is the way I can do that. And practically, there's cost constraints. And so I need to fill in what is the customer that can work with the cost constraints and the price I need to charge. You mentioned that you really like working with the customers. One question I always love to ask people is, what are you doing on your best day? What do you truly like to do the most in this business?
I had a lovely local client recently who came over and she wanted to make some garments for dancers, and she'd sketched out her idea, but then left it to me to work out how that was going to work. So that was really nice because I got the figuring out, digitizing section of it, and managed to make it so the sequins all fit together, so we'd got hardly any waste, which was really important to me and important to this client. And then there were kind of a 3D shape as well, so we could make them into something. And then, yeah, we were working out how they're going to join together. So it like felt like a really nice collaborative project where I got to do the bit that I enjoy and I know that I'm good at as well. So that, yeah, it's lots of fun.
I think maybe a general theme of the things we enjoy the most are the things we're also really good at. And you are just such a talented maker that I can see how that would be a place you gravitate.
Thank you. So, it's interesting sometimes when you go into a business and it changes what you do day to day to what you maybe imagined that you were doing. So I guess when I set up, I thought what I want is a more sustainable material that I can create things from. And then on some days, I'm more working in manufacturing. So I'm producing sequins, which it is my job, but it isn't necessarily the reason that I went into the business in the first place.
Do you think that there is a solution to that? Do you think that there is a future in which you are spending much more of your time making?
I hope so. I think that if I can expand a little bit and take on staff, then there'd be more people to do different bits of the business. So the things that I'm better at and enjoy more.
So that's a good segue to where I want to conclude, which is talking about what's next, because there's a path to get to what you just described, right? If I grow, then I can hire these people. So they're shining in those roles. You're shining in your role. What is the path that you envision to get between where you are today and there? What's ahead?
So at the moment, I'm working on 2 different bio-based products. So one that's a starch-based and one that I've started up working with another company on, which is a cellulose-based. And that's for the sequins. So it's getting those ones closer to market than the other. So it's kind of looking for manufacturers for the starch-based and then more research into the cellulose-based sequin. So kind of pushing those forwards and getting those kind of commercially ready. But also I'm looking at the things for embellishment like beads. So how we can use the same kind of materials to produce like bugle beads or seed beads, because then what you've got is embellishments that are made from the same materials, and hopefully at end of life that's an easier thing to be able to recycle or compost all in one go. So it's more product based, but in terms of selling to other companies and businesses that are going to use them. I also want to look a bit more at product as well, and kind of producing maybe like accessories and things like that, and jewellery from sequins, or using sequin waste in a different way. So I can diversify the business a little bit. So it's not just producing sequins for other brands, but also producing like products that I can sell as well.
So what I hear in the first half of that is that you think one of the keys to growth is diversifying your product line and offering more products to either the same buyers or new buyers. And then you caught me totally off guard with the second half of that. So I have to know more. That is a very different business, to go from manufacturing components to having your own brand and building these, selling them directly to consumers. Talk to me about how you came to that conclusion.
I really enjoy working kind of with brands and making things that fit their vision. But also with sequins, they're really tiny components and they've got quite a low value. So you've got to sell quite a lot to be able to make a profit on them. When I started the business, it was because I wanted to produce a film that would allow me to be able to make something from it. So it's going back to that, I think, and keeping that creativity within the business. Because even if it doesn't get anywhere, even if it's kind of research that I do and designs that I develop, each time that I do that, it makes me a better designer, using kind of sequin film to help my clients with as well. So the more things that I try, the more different ways I try and use the sequins, or the more different ways I can manipulate them into something, just gives me more knowledge to be able to work kind of with my existing clients as well. So I think it's beneficial in any way, but I also just kind of want to try some product-based things as well.
That was Rachel Clowes talking about her journey building the Sustainable Sequin Company. Here are my favorite 3 quotes from that episode and why they stood out to me. First, it's taken a while to understand that what I'm doing is running a business, not just trying to develop a new product. What a brilliant insight from Rachel there. She realized her business is about more than just her product. And this takes so many entrepreneurs a while to realize, because she, like many others, fell in love with the product, and that's why she got it into the business. That's where she wanted to spend her time. But as soon as she got into the business, she realized a product was only a small piece of it, and so much of her time needed to be spent on other things, like marketing, IT, HR, all the other things required to make the business happen. Second quote from Rachel: doing bespoke work has given me more knowledge as I go forward. Hopefully I can feed that knowledge into being more successful earlier on with the things that I do later. So Rachel started out and currently is doing bespoke work with recycled sequins. In the future, she wants to scale the business and get into biodegrading materials for her sequins, but she didn't start at that ultimate place. She started with milestones to help her get there. And she talked about how starting there allowed her to build her customer base, which can buy her future products later, allowed her to learn more about the manufacturing and more about the business itself, build her skill as an entrepreneur, and to earn revenue that she could reinvest in the business. So instead of waiting to launch until she could do the thing that she ultimately was most excited about, she found milestones in the middle that were also exciting and helped her get toward her goal and stay on that journey. Number 3, there's a difference between what people say they want and what they really do. Another phenomenal Rachel quote. She understood customer psychology. She talked to customers who said they liked the idea of dissolving dresses. But then when she really dug into it with them and observed their behavior and got into their emotions, she realized that people had an emotional attachment to the fancy dresses that they had. And the idea of dissolving it was kind of hard for them to stomach. So instead of trying to change their behavior, she adapted to it. So many great things to take away. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This is Dana Moriello, and I can't wait to see you next week on This Is a Thing.